When my wife called me a loser in front of everyone, I just smiled. She thought she'd won, that she'd shattered me in front of our friends and colleagues. What she didn't realize was that I already knew, and her little performance that night would be the final act in her perfect charade. My name is Mark, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. I worked as an IT consultant, running my own small business, while my wife, Rachel, managed public relations for high-profile clients. We had been married for 7 years, built a beautiful home, and, at least in my eyes, shared a solid partnership. But looking back, I now realize that I should have noticed the cracks in our relationship long before they turned into an insurmountable chasm. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, it was a shift in her tone, a growing distance in her touch. She began working late more often, her phone always within arm's reach, her eyes glued to it. Whenever I asked about it, she would brush me off with a condescending, "You wouldn't understand." I told myself it was just stress, that Rachel had always been ambitious, and I admired that about her. I wanted to believe that her late nights and secrecy were just part of the job, that she was working hard for us. But one night, something changed. I was sitting in the living room when I heard her laughing softly on the phone. The sound caught my attention. It wasn't the kind of laugh she used with me anymore. It was lighter, more carefree. When I asked who it was, her response was sharp and dismissive, "Just a work thing." "Why are you always so insecure, Mark?" That word, insecure, cut deeper than I expected. It became her go-to weapon in arguments, casually thrown out whenever I voiced a concern. "You're so lucky I stayed with you," she'd say with that smirk of hers. "You'd be lost without me." I began to feel like a stranger in my own marriage, a ghost haunting a house that no longer felt like home. But I stayed quiet, hoping it was just a phase, that things would get better. The night everything finally unraveled was supposed to be a celebration. Rachel had organized a networking dinner at a fancy restaurant, inviting our usual circle of friends and colleagues. I showed up as the supportive husband, the role I had perfected over the years. On the surface, everything seemed fine. That was, until the toasts began. Rachel stood up, her wine glass in hand, beaming with pride. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she said. "It's been an incredible year for me, and I couldn't have done it without the support of those closest to me." She turned toward me, her smile sharp as a blade, and added, "And of course, my husband Mark. Well, let's just say he tries his best." A ripple of laughter ran through the room. My heart dropped as she continued, her voice dripping with mockery. "It's not easy being married to someone who doesn't quite understand ambition, but I suppose every queen needs her court jester, right?" The laughter grew louder, and I felt every eye in the room on me. I wanted to shrink into the ground, to disappear. But as the humiliation burned through my veins, I remembered something. The folder hidden in my desk drawer at home. Inside were screenshots, emails, and photos, each one painting a clear picture of Rachel's late nights. She wasn't working late. She was meeting her lover, Derek, a wealthy client of hers. I gripped my glass tightly, forcing a smile, as Rachel sat back down, her expression smug. She thought she had broken me, humiliated me beyond repair. But this was her mistake, underestimating me. She might have called me a loser, but I wasn't the one leading a double life. As we drove home that night, Rachel prattled on about how successful the evening had been, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I stayed silent, my mind racing with plans. The time had come to turn the tables. I had been biding my time, waiting for the right moment to strike. And then, Rachel had handed it to me on a silver platter. The next day, I began executing my plan without hesitation. My first move was to contact a lawyer. I needed to know my options, how I could protect myself, and what steps I needed to take to secure my future. After that, I quietly began transferring money from our joint account into a private one. I left just enough in the joint account to avoid arousing suspicion, but kept enough to ensure she wouldn't drain me dry when the time came. Over the following weeks, I continued gathering evidence. I followed Rachel when she claimed to be working late, snapping photos of her with Derek at a hotel, in compromising situations. I recorded phone conversations, saved incriminating messages from her laptop, Each piece of evidence became another brick in the wall I was building around her. But my plan wasn't just about planning my escape. It was about planning her downfall. The first twist in my game came when I discovered something that made everything even more devastating. Derek wasn't just Rachel's lover. He was also her partner in crime. They had been siphoning money from her company's accounts, laundering funds using her position as a cover. My initial goal had been revenge, but now I had something far more powerful: leverage. One evening, as Rachel sat in the living room scrolling through her phone, I casually asked, "How's Derek?" Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing in suspicion. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. I shrugged nonchalantly. "Just wondering how your work thing is going." Her face turned pale. For the first time in months, she looked genuinely afraid. The night I unleashed my revenge was meticulously orchestrated. Rachel had arranged another event to announce a major promotion she had secured. Derek was there, lurking in the background like the snake he was. As Rachel stood at the podium, basking in the applause, I stepped forward. My voice was steady, but loud enough to command attention. "Before we continue," I said, "I have something to share." Rachel froze, her smile faltering as she caught sight of the stack of documents I pulled from my briefcase. "This," I said, holding them up for all to see, "is evidence of my wife's affair and her involvement in embezzlement." Gasps filled the room as I laid out everything: photos, emails, financial records, and the proof of their crimes. Derek tried to make a quick escape, but security was already waiting for him. I had tipped off the authorities in advance, and they were ready to escort him away. Rachel's carefully constructed world collapsed in front of everyone. The people she had worked so hard to impress, her friends, her colleagues, even her family, now saw her for who she truly was. As she scrambled to defend herself, I delivered the final blow. "You called me a loser, Rachel," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "But the truth is, I was the only one who ever believed in you. And now, everyone knows the real you." In the weeks that followed, Rachel's life unraveled. She lost her job, her reputation was destroyed, and Derek was gone. The company pressed charges, and she faced legal consequences for her actions. I finalized our divorce and walked away with everything I needed to rebuild my life. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from her manipulation, her lies, and her cruelty. I started focusing on myself again, rebuilding my business, reconnecting with friends, and finding joy in the small things I had once taken for granted.